Hi everyone, and welcome to my interpretation of RPG A Day 2021, wherein I talk or give a few thoughts about a prompt word on this calendar that we have to use, developed by the people who, for the 8th year, have done this project. Originally I intended it to be like one take, but things are malleable. I've added recaps, I've added callbacks, so here we go.
Holy moly, Carl. I didn't know how big of a comics fan you were. So your first edition game, you were playing on Oa. OA is Oa, right? The planet the little blue guys are in charge of the Green Lanterns are on. So you were playing with the Green Lanterns, and then you switched to second edition and switched to Alcadine, which I guess kind of makes sense because Green Lanterns are kind of like genies in their power set. Wow, dude, I never knew you did that. Also, I know you recorded this prior to last night's conversation, but last night we were hanging out with one of your players, and he was mentioning that he kind of feels that 3.5 was maybe the pinnacle of the D&D world and the best D&D rule set, especially when you're using other settings. Like you guys were talking about Iron Kingdoms, and he felt 3.5 was like the perfect base game. Anyhow, talk to you later.
Hey Jason, OA does not stand for Oa, the Green Lantern Corps planet. It stands for the Asian Adventures book that came out, I guess, in the late 80s, and was for A&D first edition, but added a lot of concepts that they rolled into second edition. Right, proficiencies was the main one that they kind of had in there. And I think you also talked about, so that's just to clarify that acronym for people. And then you also talked about how when I was grousing about our IK Iron Kingdoms 5e game, because it just mainly is like the items and the magic was hard to codify just because magic works a little different in the Iron Kingdoms verse. And I didn't really explain it very well in the 5e books that are there. And my player felt that the 3.5 version was the best, and I think it's the most comprehensive, and it definitely is the most expensive when you try to find the products on the secondary market. It had a really cool product that I liked that I used extensively, not just in 3.5, but also in their home system called Five Fingers Port of Deceit, which was like a pirate town. So it was a really good product, and I really enjoyed it. And what I'm trying to do is figure out how to segue your call into today's buzzword. And that buzzword is right, but I can't think of anything right now. So maybe something will inspire me in our Twilight 2000 4th edition game later tonight. Thanks for the call, Jason. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to do a quick recap of our Twilight 2000 4th edition game that I ran here Tuesday night. Among my players are my wife, Amy, Jason Connerly of Nerds Variety RPG Cast, and Ron Walker live from Pelham's Wasteland. We have another player, a couple other players, which could not make it, but one other player who does not have a podcast, so I guess we do not mention their names unless they tell us to mention their names. Amy doesn't seem to mind because, as Jason says, this is her podcast and I'm just a guest. So when we last left the group, they had come up among foul of a group of hunters that they felt were cannibals. They took them out, captured one, got some intel about what was going on in the area. So they did do some breakdown of the camp and basically transferred diesel out and as much as the ethanol fuel that they could produce in. They decided to take off because they didn't want to stay after firing some rounds from the 50 cal. They didn't want to stay in the area. So while the camp was being broken down, a couple of the other players' characters went and checked out the camp of the hunters, and they discovered, importantly, they didn't find anything to scrounge, but they did find that they're from a larger group, that other members of this group met here and took off in a different direction. So they definitely wanted to get back to camp and get out. So they decided that they didn't want to go parallel to the river because they learned that these were like river folk. They didn't want to run afoul of any bigger groups, so they headed south. They saw a town in the distance, where they thought was a town in the distance, and it was billowing lots of black smoke. They decided to circumvent it, and then found another place in the woods to hide, and that's where they made their home base to process the rest of the organic material they had for fuel. And so that is what so some of the members of the camp set things up to process all this, and others did recon. Some went around scrounging, but one of them just saw another column of smoke in the distance, and this time they decided they wanted to investigate. So they went out there, and they found that it was a group of U.S. soldiers that had been hit in an ambush. There were a lot of dead around, but they heard some moaning, and they went out there, and there were some people that had survived. So they triaged them very quickly, kept them stable, and actually got some really good rolls between Jason and Amy to stabilize some of these and move them. So because of that, it was a random encounter. So I'll just let you know, I basically, in this segment of the game, or this particular session, I just did a lot of procedural. There's a lot of numbers to figure out and crunch about, resources, fuel especially. I'm not so worried about food because they have a lot of food with them. And right, so they saved these people, so I had to kind of make up who they were. So I did that on the fly, which I thought was cool. I don't know how the other players thought. Is a random encounter, and then we codify it. Something exciting happened, so one of the characters went back ran back to get a truck. He saw some headlights and avoided him while he was running back on the way back to where this ambush had taken place. He was driving the truck, and he's driving it without headlights. Some people saw him though, and he lost them. So he got back to where they could put the injured on the truck and take him back to the camp. And all the folks survived that they had rescued. And they learned, importantly, that it was a group of 15, so 3 of the people were missing, and they found out who they were. They also learned that not just was the overturned, blown-out Jeep that they found, but there was a Humvee in the convoy as well. So they have an adventure hook they could try to pursue if they wanted to find out the marauders and take revenge for what they did in this ambush. In the meantime, though, Amy's character Kasha wanted to explore a town down south while they were processing organic material for fuel to just use it up as much as they could, so they wouldn't be transporting it, and could use a truck for other things, and then fill up as much as possible, at least 2/3 of the way, fill up the almost 2/3 of the way. No, more than 2/3 of the way. Fill up the APC with fuel. The other vehicles are doing okay. They don't burn as much fuel as the APC. Anyway, they went to a near town called Dobroszan or something like that. It was a Polish town nearby, and I rolled another random encounter, and it so happened that there were some Soviet troops unloading prisoners. The interesting thing is, there was only 3 of the players by this time, and Arlen's character had stayed back with the camp, and they didn't want to take on some Soviet troops, even though there weren't that many. Well, there was but there was a tank, a T-72 down there, and a Gaz 66 medical truck, and they unloaded some U.S. POWs into this town and put them into a church. Amy's character went down there and infiltrated, got medical supplies that she needed, and as she was leaving, was accosted by 2 Soviet troops, but she led them into the woods where they were subsequently ganked by the rest of the party, and they decided, I thought smartly, to take the Soviet bodies So it would look like they deserted, maybe, or at least it'd give them some time, because undoubtedly, if the Soviets know that there's activity in the woods that are hurting their soldiers, they're going to scour the woods. So they took off back to camp, and that's kind of where we left it. But it was, again, a lot of procedural, random encounters, and we have some kind of neat adventure hooks, a little bit of combat. Still, the players have not been fired upon, but they're playing it smart. I mean, they don't want to gun down, gun their pickup down into town, open fire, and then have a T-72 blow them to smithereens, right? So, and about double or maybe 4 times the amount of troops that they had with them. So maybe it'll be something to explore or not. I'm sure that the other Americans in the party will want to rescue the POWs, but we'll see how it goes. So there it is, the Twilight 2000 4th edition game that we ran. Hello. Today's prompt word is write. Write, the written word. What does it mean to write? I think it's curious that the default assumption in D&D 5e is that all the characters know how to read and write. However, in the game that I like to play, and it might be my favorite game right now since it's very exciting and hilarity ensues all the time, is Warhammer Fantasy RPG 4, the 4th edition. And there you need a talent to write. As a human, you don't necessarily know how to read and write. And I think it's very telling how important this is to the players when they declared in their new group for the Enemy Within campaign, oh my gosh, more than half of us know how to read and write. So, whereas before, I think only one person knew initially how to read and write. Maybe none of them knew how to read and write initially. And then one of them, a replacement character, knew how to read and write. And then one character switched careers to get the talent, to have the talent available to read and write. But that's not really what I want to talk about with regards to writing, how games treat writing. I think some just hand wave it, and it's so common to us nowadays, right, that we don't really think about illiteracy and how much of a modern phenomenon reading and writing and literacy is, right? So what I wanted to talk about is writing, and me personally, one of these days I'd like to write a gaming product. And I've contributed in the past to some products. I collaborated with Brandon Hodge and gave some contribution to From Shore to Sea, and one of the another, either a supplement or an adventure for Pathfinder through Kobold Press and Paizo. But I really wanted to get into them. After that, it didn't work out. I got really busy with my science career and being a postdoc, and you got to produce, publish, but not gaming stuff. So I put that on hold for forever. And I usually, as my gamers know, I run published modules. But recently I've given a crack at writing my own stuff, or as in the case, and maybe this is how the recap relates to write, just setting up a random encounter and riffing off the random encounter. For example, my last 2 adventures for Deadlands, I just kind of flipped the cards using the random encounter table and came up with what was going on. And I know it's not writing an adventure, but it's a start. Same thing last night with Twilight 2000. I just dealt the cards for the random encounters, and we had 2 random encounters that can lead to a longer adventure. And I know we all do that as GMs, but are we able to sit down and write down the adventure? I know that I ran last year, it's been about a year, where I ran a mini campaign of Cthulhu Invictus, and initially I had wanted to have this prelude that took place in the Toteberg Forest, and then X number of years later have the adventure for recovering one of the Legion standards. And my player said, you should write this up. I haven't. and not write up the first part, that was a prelude, but take these old characters, tell the or kind of give them their backstory, what happened at the Toteberg Forest, and then write an adventure of them going back out to find this last standard. So that would be kind of neat. I just need, and I have outlines and notes, but I just, that's the big thing, is sitting down and writing it, right? I've conceived of a Delta Green adventure that I have in my mind and in an outline that is kind of a, it's called a emergency stent, and it kind of takes place in San Antonio, and the Delta Green group is called in to investigate this medical procedure gone bad. And it actually looks pretty cool, like even on the VTT, and I have it on the Roll20. I have things set up on the VTT, and I have like a set of brief outline. And I know how these things develop. It was really neat when I got to play in a game run by Shane Ivey from ArcDream Publishing, and I got to play in a convention game of his, and he had like notes and was writing things down, and it eventually became the Hourglass product as a Delta Green operation. And I actually do. Oh, I do have playtesting credit. I'm kind of checking it out now. I do have playtesting credit because we helped develop some of the things, and I think one of the NPCs, we came up with the NPC's name and various things that happened. So pretty cool. I mean, so I have contributed. I'd like to contribute more, but I saw like Shane taking notes and how he had this outline that was like filled in. But then the stopgap for me is writing it out. So I don't know. One of these days, I guess I'll get over that hump. Maybe this Delta Green is a way to go. Develop it, play test it, both with you all, my players, and at conventions, and then go from there. But hey, it can happen. I've seen the notes, I've seen the outline, and I've seen it become a written product. So there you go. My dream, not my arc dream, but my dream is to write and be a contributing author to the games that we love. All right, peace out, everyone. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow.